Welcome back, Honors. All right. Apologies for posting a little bit later than normal, but as a favor, I'm going to try and keep this one at or under about 15-ish minutes. Deal? All right. That way we can kind of push forward. But I was at a funeral all day yesterday, so like it was just a little bit tough for me to kind of get back home and do stuff like this. But I'm going to stick to it, and I'm still going to keep pushing, even though lacrosse season has officially started, because the last thing I want to do is for us to get behind. All right. But speaking of, let's get after it. So we left off talking about the era of colonization, right? We're moving into an era of prosperity of the European countries. They're pushing into the New World continents. They're spreading their ideas, and they are ran particularly in Spain by the motivations of gold, God, and glory. All right. So, like I said, you're going to have college professors that bring that up. All right. So, don't ask me why it's so convenient of a rhyme, stuff like that, or not a rhyme, but of a it's not a mnemonic either, just not letters of a way to remember it. Don't ask me why it's so convenient, but it is. All right. So to Spain, winning souls for Christianity was just as important as winning land, right? So this is the element that we're talking about of the God motivation, right? The glory motivation was going back to when they controlled all of about 25% of the entire world, right? So this is the God motivation, though. To Spain, winning souls for Christianity was just as important as winning land. Now, remember, this is post-Counter-Reformation Spain, all right? This is post-Counter-Reformation Spain, Catholic Church. So with that, you've got new orders like the Jesuits. You've got the Ursuline nuns, right? They're trying to spread the faith via education and good deeds and welfare as well, right? So the Spanish, with the help of the Catholic Church, are going to work to convert natives by building churches and regulating the Spanish settlers, which up to this point had been the biggest problem with Spanish colonization, right? So the Catholic Church comes in and tries to be like, hey, Columbus, you're a bad person. Get out of here because you didn't regulate the people you brought with you like a good leader should, right? And then he ends up being deported back to Spain and dying in Europe, thinking that China was on the other end of Mexico the entire time. And in a way, I guess it is. All right, so it's way further than he realizes. Now, anyway, and then there are other ones as well. Cortez's guys, when Cortez leaves, they kill Montezuma, right? So you got a lot of issues with these Spanish settlers, right? So the Catholic Church comes in to try and regulate them, right? So then you've got into our gold perspective, right? So we've gone glory, check. We've gone God, check. Now we're going glory, all right? I mean, crap. That was so stupid sounding because I looked at you guys and I was like, glory, and said the wrong thing. Now we're getting into the gold perspective, right? So the most valuable thing coming into Spain from the Americas was gold and silver, all right? Now, we're talking about a stupid, comical amount of gold and silver as well. This is not like drops in the bucket. This is like the bucket, all right? Like there's a redonkulous amount of gold coming in, okay? So it's somewhere in the neighborhood of thousands of pounds and then millions of pounds of silver. I'm not going to give you the exact numbers because I can never remember them, but I want to say it's in the neighborhood of like 600,000 pounds of gold. Like, so it's ridiculous. Their insatiable desire for the gold coming from the colonies is a big reason why they actually declined later on. We'll get to that, but still, we're here first. So that right there is a gold mine from post-colonial Spain. How safe does that look? Thank you, Robert Gardner. Not at all. All right, so very, very nice. So anyway, there's not even like a reinforcement structure on it. Like, it's really, really bad. And also, I'm not going down there. Just throwing that out there. But we'll talk about who did go down there here in a sec, all right? So the colonies are also going to ship out raw materials to Spain, right? So right now what we're going over is like how Spain makes their money in this gold perspective off the era of colonization, right? So the colonies, a big reason is, of course, this raw liquid cash coming in, right? So gold and silver. Then you've also got the colonies shipping out things that they can produce there that the rest of Europe doesn't even have access to, that the rest of the world didn't have access to, all right? The colonies are going to ship out raw materials. Raw materials is an unprocessed good waiting to be made into a product, all right? So to Spain, these things include like foods that have been found in the New World, like potatoes, pumpkins, squash, certain types of beans, corn, right? Chocolate, cotton. Even though they did know what cotton was, they are going to still be shipping a large amount of it back, all right? And then the big one, sugarcane, which is from the eastern side of the world as well. But here's the thing. Jot this down. Sugarcane grows ridiculously well in North and South America, particularly in the tropics region. All right, so Louisiana still to this day big cash crop is sugarcane. The Caribbean islands used to be called the sugar islands because it grows sugarcane just so well, right? So sugarcane was used to make different items that the world really wanted, right? So it makes molasses, sugar, and rum. Now, the reasons why this is so important is because now Spain controls a giant swath of land that grows sugarcane very, very quickly. And so now they've got this like basically white gold coming in, right? So, however, the problem is that sugarcane has to be grown on very large plantations, and it needs a ton of workers, all right? That's a sugarcane plantation later. Don't ignore that picture. That is what sugarcane is, all right? For those of you who don't know what sugarcane is, it is a naturally growing product. Do not get sugar confused with salt. Salt comes from underground. Sugar, on the other hand, comes from the stalks of these plants. The way that it works is they harvest them, they cut them down when they hit a mature age, and then they would actually press all of the sugared water out of it, right? So the sap and the water from inside the plant drops into a kettle that it's then cooked and reduced down into a substance that's a very, very dark syrup because it burns a little bit as you cook it down, known as molasses, right? So that's why sometimes they'll say you move as slow as molasses because it's a very, very thick, very viscous syrup that you can then use to make things like regular sugar when you spread it and dry it and cook it and then like it actually crumbles apart, or you can make rum with it, which is very cheap on the alcohol, like out of all the alcohols, right? That's why. Who loves it? Pirates. All right, so it's very, very cheap. Now, here's another thing. Laws are going to forbid the colonists from trading with anyone but Spain. Now, also, this is not just in Spain. This is also in the English colonies, also in the French colonies, also in several other different areas when it comes to the era of colonization. But it is going to forbid colonists from trading with anyone but Spain. So Spain's going to start sending manufactured goods back to the colonies, like clothes and building materials. Now, if for any of you noticing this right now, somebody like I feel like somebody like Leanna Hobbs right now is like raising her hand, or Jackie Hand has her hand up. She's like, wait a minute, Mr. Terry. So you're telling me that the colonies are growing all of this stuff, working really hard, sending it back to places like Spain, just for Spain to make it into something and then sell it back to them at a higher price. All right, so that's just the relationship that the founding countries had with these colonies, right? So now we got to get into something else, though. You got massive sugarcane plantations, huge gold and silver mines. Who's working them? So a lot of you are immediately going to raise your hand and you're going to say, slaves, right? It's 1500s. You have no other reason to think that's not true, but you're not correct out the gate. All right. So slavery was not a big business industry yet. You need to jot that down really quick. Slavery, not a big business yet when it came to the new colonies. All right, because they already had a system of labor. It was called the encomienda, right? Which is a system of forced labor. So instead of purchasing slaves, right, they decided, let's just, whoa, where am I going? There we go, sorry. Instead of purchasing slaves, they decided that they would save money by instating a system known as the encomienda. The encomienda is a system of forced labor that gave the colonists the right to force natives to work by law. If the natives refused, the conquistadors had full right to hunt them down, all right, and kill them. So that is a huge, huge premise, okay? So it wasn't slaves working on these like early colonies for Spain. It was actually the natives that had lived there already that had survived the smallpox, the measles, and the flu outbreaks, right? And then they're going to be pushed and forced to actually work. Now, a lot of these natives are going to end up perishing due to these very, very terrible, 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 terrible working conditions, mainly in the mines and on the plantations. The mines are going to kill thousands because of poor conditions, no ventilation, exhaustion, right? And the native children are going to be used to get inside small holes and mines, drag carts, and open ventilation windows, right? So there's going to be a ridiculous amount of things that they're being forced to do. With what reward and what are they being paid? Nothing, all right? They're just being given the right to not die, all right? So the big one out of the two, if you had to ask me, I would much rather work on a slave, or not a slave, on a sugar cane plantation due to the fact that this is what working conditions in the mines looked like, all right? So this right here also is a woman, all right? A young woman. So women would typically be used to drag carts. Men would be used at this thing called the seam, which is where the mine actually is trying to access the good underground, right at the front with a pickaxe. So men would be actually down there like trying to chip away at that. And then the children would be used to open like these ventilation windows, right? Let me see if I can find a picture of one real quick. Ventilation window, Spanish silver mine. Can I find one? Can I find one? Can I find one? Can I find one? All right. Well, that's another picture of one of the mines. Come on. Man, I've seen a picture of them before, but basically what it looks like is there's this huge, huge, huge shaft, much like this one that goes down into the mine, where there's a fire actually lit underneath it to try and have the hot air rise and push some of the bad air out of the mine itself. And there would be a child sitting up there on a ledge that would actually pull on a rope, and it would open a window to allow that bad air to escape. But if the child slips and falls off, he plummets about 50 feet to his death into a fire. So, like, these working conditions were absolutely terrible. And so I know I misspelled dying. I know, calm down. It's D-Y-I-N-G. I know. But, like, I've heard about it 1,000 times. I keep it in this presentation just to be funny and to give the kids give you guys a little bit of time to, like, actually jot this down. This time, I pinky swear, I actually meant to spell it that way before my little honors kids freak out. Now, the dying natives, though, are going to cause a labor shortage, right? So the Spanish are going to begin to bring in slaves from Africa by large, large, large boats, right? So we'll talk about the slave trade after we get through the air colonization and then the Columbian exchange and things like that, okay? So the last couple things that we got to talk about, and then we're honestly almost done, is like just kind of colonial society and culture and the expanse of this entire idea. So the cities and towns are going to whoa, okay, hold on. So these colonies are going to grow at rapid rates. That should be a bullet point like right up here. Colonies will grow at rapid rates. So the reason why the colonies grew at such rapid rates is due to the fact that life in the colonies for someone who was maybe an indentured servant, a poor urban worker, a poor farmer, a former serf, right? Like if you were any of those things, life in the colonies looked much more appetizing than life in Spain did. So they're going to see a massive influx of people coming in to find work and a new life in these colonies, right? So these colonies are going to grow at fantastic rates into cities and towns, and they're going to include homes, markets, government buildings, harbors, government buildings as in like where the viceroy was kept. So a viceroy is actually a Spanish governor, all right? So, no, wait. Yeah, a viceroyalty. Yeah, a viceroy. Now, so social classes are also going to begin to mix and begin to develop into many races. And so here's another thing. This only happened in the Spanish colonies, the mixing of races, okay? So, and historically what we call them, just for the heads up, for this is the last slide, all right? So in the Spanish colonies, only a couple of things happened. Number one, no one worked on Sundays, not even slaves, right? So slaves actually were encouraged to go to church or practice their own faiths and things like that. That's where a lot of your old school voodoo stuff comes from or whatever. Like a lot of that's Hollywood. A ton of it's Hollywood. It's not even spelled correctly. If you're actually looking at that religion, it's actually voodoo. All right. So, but we're not going to get into that right now. I could talk about that for 3 days. So the big thing is though, in the Spanish colonies, the mixing of races was also accepted. Now, a lot of people always ask this. They're like, well, wait a minute, Mr. Terry, why? Why not in the English ones and why not in the French ones? Well, the English ones in particular, due to the fact that they were Protestant and they were very, very particular about these things, and they saw the ideas of the mixing of races to be very impure and very, very unacceptable. All right, so whereas in the Spanish colonies, it wasn't seen as that much because there was also massive amounts of interaction between Spanish settlers, natives, and slaves as well, right? So also, with this idea of not working on Sundays, many slaves would actually pick up part-time labor on Sundays, get paid for it, and sometimes purchase their freedom. The Catholic colonies actually encouraged this. They wanted you to work for your freedom because that meant that you might actually get out there and add to the economy, right? So what's going to happen when some of these people are going to become freed slaves, and what's going to happen as you interact with these natives, and like people are going to begin to like culturally mix, right? So mestizo was a word that was given to a native of European descent and a Native American descent, and a mulatto was a word used to describe a person of African and European descent. Now, really, really quickly, this word not colloquially used anymore. No one walks around and says mestizo anymore. However, this one, when using it in a historic sense, discussing this time, is fine. But do not walk around and say this word in real life because it can be very offensive, all right? So, not can be, is very offensive. So just don't, like, this is still a historical term that the Spanish used to describe this specific social class that existed during this time period, but do not walk around saying it, all right? So, but speaking of, one last little bullet point underneath there, this is also going to create a problem on the back end for the Spanish, right? Because here's the thing. If you're now creating new social classes to identify these people of mixed race, what happens when members of them start to mix with one another? If you have a mestizo and a mulatto that mix together, then what are they? What if you have somebody that has a mestizo parent and then a full-on European parent? What are they? They're three-quarters of one or the other, right? So, like, what are you going to do? So these things are going to spiral out of control as the years progress in about, like, 300 years, and it's going to lead to these new social classes called, like, Creoles, of these people that have massively mixed race and, like, lineage backgrounds and things like that, and then all of these other, like, different concepts, and they're going to kind of rally one another together, and they're going to have their Latin American independence movements, right? So, but that's where we're going to stop talking about the Spanish, and then tomorrow we're going to get into the colonization era of France and England, all right? So I will talk to you guys then. Have a great rest of your weekend.